In this lecture, we are going to talk about DPOs, or Data Protection Officers, and Data Protection Officer Appointment Requirements. We will start by defining what a DPO is. We will look at the different statutes that require either a DPO or a DPO-like or adjacent role. We will look at when a DPO is required, and then the DPO themselves requirements. And so what are the qualifications that this person must have in order to serve as a DPO? Again, DPO is an acronym for Data Protection Officer, and this individual is responsible for monitoring an organization's compliance with the GDPR typically, or in some cases, other statutes may also require a DPO, but they are requiring a DPO for their statute, not for the GDPR. DPOs are required by Article 37 of the GDPR, and Brazil's LGPD also requires a data protection officer. 3 statutes that require a DPO adjacent include Canada's PIPEDA, South Korea's Data Protection Act, and previously, prior to being replaced by the GDPR in 2018, Germany, under the EU Data Protective Directive, also required a DPO adjacent appointment. Now, I'm not sure whether or not you're going to be tested on the 95/46/EC, but if you do see that, make sure you can connect it with this specific context. So a DPO is required for public authorities unless that public authority is a court. DPOs are also required when an organization's core activities include the following. Number 1, regular and systematic monitoring of data subjects on a large scale. For example, if the organization is tracking individuals' behavior on the internet or monitoring their engagement with a website, such as a social media website, for example, then those organizations would be required to appoint a DPO. If core activities include, number 2, processing special categories of data, then a DPO is required under that circumstance. And just as a quick FYI for your information, special categories of data under the GDPR refer to the following: race, ethnicity, political opinions, religious and philosophical beliefs, genetic data, health data, and sexuality. Those are all considered special categories of data. And finally, if the organization is processing data related to criminal convictions or offenses, then a DPO is required. When it comes to DPO qualifications, data protection officers must have the following. They must have expert knowledge of data protection laws and practices. They must report to the highest management level of the data controller or processor. They must monitor an organization's compliance with the GDPR. They must provide advice during the DPIA process. And when necessary, they must cooperate with supervisory authorities. Now, I know what you're probably thinking to yourself, hey, Dr. David, do I need to remember all of these articles? And my answer is, they may pop up on the exam. I know that's likely to be an unpopular answer, but it's just the fact. Now, do I think you're likely to have 10 questions on the exam that are requiring you to match a specific article number with subject matter? No, you're unlikely to see 10 questions. Might you see 1 or 2 questions? Yes. I think what's most important here is that you know what the requirements are. If you're short on bandwidth, you might remember that DPO requirements come from Articles 37 through 39. And if you really want to over-prepare for the exam, then you will remember the article number and the subject matter. Again, maybe 1 question, maybe 2. Unlikely to be more than that. In this lecture, we defined what a Data Protection Officer, or DPO, is. This is an individual that is responsible for monitoring an organization's compliance with a law. In this case, the GDPR is what we're talking about most regularly. Remember that this requirement comes from Articles 37 through 39 of the GDPR. Remember also that Brazil's LGPD also requires the appointment of a DPO. DPO adjacent appointments come from Canada's PIPEDA, South Korea's Data Protection Act, and in Germany under the EU Data Protective Directive. Remember that the Data Protective Directive was replaced by the GDPR in 2018. A DPO is required for public authorities unless that authority is a court, and DPOs are also required when an organization's core activities include regular and systematic monitoring of data subjects on a large scale, special categories of data, or activities relating to data on criminal convictions or offenses. Finally, there are the following requirements concerning the DPO. The DPO must have expert knowledge of data protection law and practices. They must report to the highest management level of data controller or processor. They must monitor an organization's compliance with the GDPR. They must provide advice during the DPIA process, and they must cooperate when necessary with supervisory authorities. Again, the main takeaway for the requirements is that you know what the requirements are. You can lump them together as coming from Articles 37 to 39. I think it's unlikely that you're going to need to match article with subject matter, but it is possible.